All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of My Little Town. Yuval here with Yo Miami. Sitting down here for episode 14 of My Little Town. Thankful to have with us today. I meant to ask you before we went live, but pronounce your last name for us.
Adamo.
Adamo.
Adamo. Yeah, it's Italian, from Sicily.
Oh, of course. I don't know. I'm like, Adam. Like you're surprised. Like, Adam? Oh.
There's so many Chris's out there, so like, whoever calls me Adamo. So.
I had the same thing, but I went to a Jewish school, so it was, if your name was Daniel, David, or Jonathan, you were known by your last name if you were lucky, and if not, you had a nickname that was more descriptive of you as a person, like physically, and that was usually not as you fall again, at least. That was one case where, it's not. I didn't have to be referred to as my last name. There weren't that many in Miami in general.
Not yet.
Yeah. It is a pretty popular name in Israel now, but yeah, no, in Miami, I've met one in Miami, and happened to also go to UM, so that was a weird coincidence. I mean, I guess depending how you look at it. I mentioned the locals are like. So first, I got to give a shout out to our sponsor, our beer sponsor, J. Wakefield. We're always open to other types of sponsors, appliance companies, like media outlets, So J. Wakefield, last and only independently owned and operated brewery in Wynwood. We're sipping on their, what is it,
Nomas. Imperial Sour is delightful. We have hints of grapefruit, lime, and agave nectar.
There we go. It's a margarita and a beer.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, where's the tequila?
Yeah, that's for like when we do the Rachel Ray edition, like of the show. We'll be like, how to spice up your beer cocktail, which is a thing, and I guess I won't get into that. It's my feelings.
I'm a big fan of beer cocktails, actually.
The only place where I kind of didn't like have that like cringe like which I don't know why. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but I guess I'm just not a cocktail person in general. But MC Kitchen, because they had like a kind of like deal with Dogfish Head, so they had like some crazy beers that they would get from them because they were like, oh, we'll only serve Dogfish, so they would get like crazy stuff that you couldn't get, at the store or at the other bars around here, and then they would come up with whatever cocktails like using them. So it's cool. That was a nice little tangent to start off the show. So Chris, so to give people a little bit of context who might not know you, some people might know you for your shirts. We'll do a brief. I don't want to get like too far down.
We can dive right in.
I went through a Hawaiian shirt phase in high school, so when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not the only one. I don't know if it was like by peer pressure or by just I grew out of it, but yeah, it was like probably a year or two that, and the same that like what was it, rayon? What's the
This material? Is made out of Japanese spun rayon.
Yeah,
it's fabulous. It's like pajamas.
It's Japanese spun, but it was very hot for South Florida. Let me tell you, I don't know. Those might be better because they're the Japanese.
Yeah, they're all put together in Hawaii and very breathable. I will say my mornings are very easy.
Shout out the brand.
Oh, Jams World. Yeah, they've been very good to me and vice versa, and it's a good little happy marriage. I mean, mornings are very easy. Wake up, pick a Hawaiian shirt, get out the door.
See, I transitioned to t-shirts, so it's the same thing, but it's just, is it a black t-shirt for a formal occasion, or is it a t-shirt with like a cartoon, cartoon?
This is like my more formal wear. I have some black in there.
Exactly.
It goes good with a suit jacket. Very, sport coat. I did this morning. I just took off. But no, I started doing it 3 years ago. I haven't missed a day since. So I'm on
yeah,
year 3 now.
The interview I saw, I think it had been 2 years. So
yeah, so going strong. Yeah, it's the story goes is my dad. I was wearing it for like a couple months straight. And my dad lost his memory, and he didn't know who anybody was. Right. So I'm like, I guess I'm stuck wearing these damn shirts forever.
It's something to like identify, like to kind of hold on to.
Thankfully, he got it back. Yeah. But I kept wearing the shirts. And now he thinks he started the trend. He wears shirts every day. So it's
full circle.
Got 2 of us now.
How many people have you like that? Actually, I would be curious to see how many people you inspired that now are like, you know what, that's a good idea. Why don't I wear Hawaiian shirts?
It's an acquired taste, like beer cocktails.
Your stories out there, I guess. I think the beer cocktails are a little more mass appeal, or more people willing to do it on a daily basis. Maybe it
Yeah, alcoholics.
Yeah. It's like, not a good parallel. All right, we've talked a lot and not talked a lot about you, so I want to dive into, I like to do just kind of a quick run through of kind of the origin story, and then we'll get into a little more of like what you're doing more recently and what you're getting into coming up. So grew up in Queens, moved around a lot, single mom, met a lot of kids, made a lot of friends, like had to learn to like make new friends, I guess quickly to a certain extent, like whenever you moved. I thought that was interesting. Also, I don't remember if you made the parallel or if I just saw a parallel in that experience to maybe someone who didn't necessarily move around a lot, but someone who grew up in Miami like myself, that interaction or that interaction is, I hate when I don't find the exact right word that I'm thinking of, and it's like I could come up with one similar that will do the trick, but interaction. I hate myself.
Correlation?
No. Immersion. No. Interaction with a lot of different cultures and people from different backgrounds, which is obviously like a very New York thing, and I guess more specifically Queens. I'm not familiar with it. Yeah, I know there are boroughs, and
Queens is the melting pot of the world, really. Okay. Kind of like Miami is these days. But yeah, I grew up with my block is the UN, so every country was represented. Literally, no, not literally. Basically, neighbor was from Israel, neighbor was from China, across the street was from India. It was wonderful. You got to have all the different people from all around the world and meet their families and understand their customs from like a very young age. So that's all I knew. It was like everyone's different. Yeah, which is a really cool thing to have from day one, and most folks do not have that experience. Yeah. So I'm very blessed to have that as a kid, to know that there is more than just me out there. I'm not the only type of person.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very important factor as a person in general. And I mean, all the like the famous like authors and stuff that talk about travel and how it's necessary for growth.
I was blessed. I had to walk 10 feet to travel to a different country.
Exactly, right. So, but it's true, and I think that it shapes a person to, in other areas of their life, to be more open, to be kind of more aware that like the lens that the world is filtered through as I see it is not the world, it's the world as I see it, and there's a million different ways that people see it in their own way, and just that perspective or that awareness to that phenomenon. Yeah, it's that song.
LL Cool J?
Yeah, what? I know like the Muppets.
Oh well,
phenomenon.
Also LL Cool J.
They might have done the version of it, and I know the Muppet one. I don't know.
Possible.
But yeah, I think that that's something that just because I like to tie things into Miami a little bit, that I think that it's kind of a weird dynamic in Miami where we have that very much, but also not, in the sense that it is a big melting pot, but it's also a frying pan and a Pyrex and like it's you can be immersed. I think that was the word I was looking for before. You can be immersed in all these different cultures, but there is kind of a division.
It's kind of like a TV dinner. I heard who said it the other day, Billy Corbin. It's like a TV dinner. You have potatoes, you got your little grilled cheese, you have your salad. They kind of have little barriers. You can go over there and have some, but they're probably going to go back to where they came from. Right. But I think now we're seeing more of that intermingling, which is good. So.
Yeah, and that definitely.
Amongst the younger people, at least.
I think it's always happened with these times of kind of transition and including and including but not limited to like gentrification and those types of things that happen. I mean, Hialeah was a big Jewish area, and then you wouldn't know that if you've lived here for the last 10 years, unless you're a history buff and dug into things. But so I think that kind of thing is cyclical, and I think that's also what allows for the cultures to kind of mix a little bit. Is there's always that, you always have that not hangover, but like stayover, like you always have that remainder that it's like a little bit slower to transition, so you're always going to have that point where a certain neighborhood or community is going to have a little bit, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I think that's what allows for a little bit of that cultural commingling, co-working.
Yeah, it's one thing we work.
It's 29. Yeah, which fucking, if only I came up with the fucking term co-working in 2012 when I did exactly that. But, right, because we worked in all that shit, I feel like what's later. I don't know why I look for reasons to be like, oh, I did it before you fucking people that are making millions of dollars doing it now. So jumping back into your childhood, so you actually were more of like a sports guy. I don't know what to label, but like, so you're very into baseball, played on a level where you traveled with the Junior Olympics in '96, right?
Yeah, 94. It was an awesome experience playing in Beijing and Finland as a kid. Yeah, I was also this big when I was 12, so I was 5'11", 220 pounds. I was a monster.
Right.
You know, every kid was like half my size, so it's kind of that guy you see in Little League is like, that kid's not 12. Right, like give me your ID. Let me see your social security card.
Yeah.
So I always had my birth certificate on me at all times. But everyone caught up by like high school. So, you know, leveled up eventually.
You had adjustment period of like, I don't have that like thing anymore of like.
But I was still good. You know, I played high school ball and then into college a little bit. Injuries derailed me a bit, which is, you know, comes in. I'm still, right now I'm injured. Yeah. Pretty much like tore my meniscus on Saturday, so dealing with that right now.
Coming out despite that.
Oh, it's good.
Do you want we could get you a little like stool, like a
no
elevate?
I'm good. I'm good. Now it's the weekend warrior. Now I'm almost 39, so you forget your body, your mind thinks you're good. Yeah, well, thank you.
Maybe it's the shape head thing, though.
Yeah, everyone's shape their heads.
I've thought about it, but I'm like, I have enough.
It's so hot in Miami.
I think it's like a shape thing. I'm like shape conscious. Shape self-conscious.
The last 20 years of having a shaved head, I've saved who knows how much money on shampoo, on haircuts, on styling products.
Yeah, I would imagine you just shave.
I do in my shower, 5 minutes every couple of days, in and out. Yeah. So I'm all into time save. However I can cut time out of my day, I do it. Wear the same shirts, minimalist haircut. You know, I mean,
I found. See, I'm gonna use that as the point to say, because as I was listening, like kind of doing my due diligence and looking at some of your past interviews, I felt like a very kindred spirit about like a lot of the things that you said or the things that you experienced. I identify with a lot. One of them being, not that I did this, but talking about you playing ball on a kind of higher level. But so I guess the way that you got into playing college ball was by, I guess there wasn't like, you couldn't get in through like the scouts and like whatever those like avenues, so you basically just made a tape of yourself, or like back then multiple tapes of yourself playing, sent it to like 100 colleges and got some scholarships
out of it. Called me and I was like, all
right,
give me that scholarship. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you know, it was just a way to get to college. At that point, you know, I knew I wasn't going to become a professional, but I love the idea of having a team around me, and like I found so much as a single, you know, kind of I grew up by myself pretty much. So my brother was like, I was 15 when I had brothers, so I was basically only child forever. I always wanted to have like a, you know, a community around me, and moving so much, you lost that so many times. I moved to a new neighborhood to make 10 new friends, you know, from day one. I acquired the skill to become a chameleon. Kind of blend in, understand how folks, you know, live and breathe and react and what they're into, and you know, you kind of learn new things and you get to like them. Before you didn't really like them, but you know, eventually you do.
At least be open to like them.
Totally, that's how I've always been. I'll try anything once. You know, if I don't like it, I'm not gonna do it again. Kind of like, you know, IPAs. I'll have an IPA here and there, but I don't really love them. If everyone else is having them, I'm gonna have one.
Yeah, I mean, IPAs are. I don't think there's. I won't say there's anyone, but it's something where it's definitely an acquired taste, I feel like, and I consider myself like a craft beer snob, but I try not to be snobby about it, but like, you know, I've been into the craft beer scene like since 2009, like give or take. DRB shout out / RIP, but back in the day, but
pour one out.
Yeah, not we don't pour out Wakefield.
Sorry,
but you know, even I had to go through a phase of intentionally drinking beers that I'm not like, oh, this is my first choice of a beer to drink, but you start to appreciate it. Doesn't take like 50, you know, like until you start finding ones, I'm like this kind of IPA or whatever, and then that allows you to kind of open your palate up to being like, oh, like,
in college, I was like that. We had a bar down the block from us in Binghamton where it was like we drank every beer on tap for like a year straight. You have our name on the wall. Our name's on the wall. So we wanted to have that like sense of pride. Like 20 years later, go back to that bar, it's still on the wall. It's kind of cool to have those things.
If the RB was still around, well, they used to have the passport, so they would have
similar idea.
Like so it was like you drink a beer from every country, did it. There was like every letter of the alphabet was one, because they had like that was their whole thing. They had like like over 200, 500 like different beers from all over the world. So yeah, they had like all those. Yeah, they didn't put you on the wall, but
you commit. Once you commit to something, it's good to do it.
I did.
Everything I do has that similar theme of like, I'm gonna see this thing out.
Right.
And it's gonna get rocky and it's gonna be hard, but if you're in for the long haul, people will appreciate that, and I think that has a lot to say about how you treat your friends, your family, your coworkers. Like, just show up for people.
Right.
That's the biggest thing you can do right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say for Miami is saying something. It's something that you imported maybe more than learned here.
Yeah, I mean, most people say if you show up on time and call folks back, you're like ahead of like 8 or 10 of the people here.
I have definitely said that, and I've said that to clients where I'm like, yeah, listen, like, oh wow, you're like early to me, and I'm like, yeah. And it's I always have to have that moment of like, oh right, you're not used to that. That's not the norm. I'm like, I guess it's because I come more from a business background, so it's like it's a given. It's like, oh, it's like I wore suits and whatever, but it was like, bare minimum of you're respecting the time of the person that is hopefully going to give you some business, and the least you could do is say, hey, I'm not going to make you wait, or I'm gonna respect the fact that you have other shit to do and you're deciding to spend some of that time on me.
I kind of found it from my uncle. He used to be a very like on-time person, and he always would map out where we're going ahead of time, pre-Google Maps. He would draw on the map where we're going. He would take test drives, like going to places. And like, Uncle Charles, I think we can figure out tomorrow. I was like, this is gonna take 17 minutes tomorrow, so you gotta get up at 6:15. Okay,
right.
I get to the ball game.
I respect that. I'm very.
But I was always early, and all those hours I was early for things. I got to practice and get better at stuff, and talk to strangers, which I'm a big fan of, talking to strangers. It's really important to open that up, and you never know who's gonna come at you, which is right now I've met so many folks who I just open up conversations with folks for no reason, or just like they're next to me.
Right. Which again, that's something I feel like which I hate, like how now there's a term for like everything, but like there's an introverted extrovert, extroverted introvert, whatever, but like I'm not like it's draining for me to like talk to people, but in the right, if I'm in the right state of mind and I'm not like stressed out and I'm like whatever, and I'm like, hey, I'm here, like let's like let me be in the moment and be here, grocery store, whatever. Like I to a fault, I would say I'll hear someone having a conversation and like oh, I have something to contribute, and it's like I don't stop to be like, it's none of my business, like why do they care what I have to say? It's just like, hey, I know what you're talking about. Or
it's important.
It's
being human. We're here to be social. We're here to help each other out. That's why we're here.
Now I feel like now there's that like the opposite end of that, where people like get super defensive or super like that's you never know. And I feel like Larry David, or like Curb Your Enthusiasm is the best kind of illustration or exaggerate like caricature of that phenomena. I'm overusing a word that I'm not pronouncing correctly.
You and
but the idea that like oh, this is common courtesy, like it's just a matter of respect of everyone and treating people how you want to be treated and whatever, but then also having to have the realization that look at it from the other person's side and being like, well, maybe that's not how they want to be treated the way that you want to be treated. So I think that awareness is important also, not to say, oh, don't talk to strangers, but being like, maybe they're having a shitty day. Like, in other words, not taking it personally if they're not as into the interaction or not as open to the interaction as you are. Yeah. Like, have you found that? I mean, in Miami especially.
A lot of it comes down to fear. People fear the unknown. They don't want to open a can of worms.
Right.
But they're not
sure
where it's going to go. Yeah, they're always like defensive. Like, what's this person's angle? And,
right.
If that's what you go into life about, it's going to be a real shitty life.
Yeah.
You're going to not have any great kind of like joyful moments out of nothing to happen, because you're going to have everything planned and you're going to have a set expectation, and it's just not a really welcoming way to live. And I think the ones that realize that early enough really become big successes. Like they don't fear failure. They see it as like a really big positive sign. Even as a young child, like I definitely feared failure as a kid. And I realized until I was older, that was like stupid, because like every time you fail, you're closer to like success.
Right. As long as you learn from it, and it's not just like and then you just keep doing the same thing.
As long as you're confident in it. Right. That's the biggest thing. If you fail with confidence, you're gonna look good.
Right.
You may not do it well, but as long as you feel like, I'm trying my damn hardest, right?
Right.
That shows. You can see the effort that someone puts into something. And
yeah,
most people are not going to give you shit if you're trying your hardest and you fail.
Right. It depends how spectacularly you fail and how many people you take down with you.
Well, if you have the best intentions around it.
And what we're talking about failing at, because if you're like, I don't know, an airplane mechanic and you're
different story.
Yeah. Let's go put asterisks on some of these.
Yeah. Don't go flying Boeings around the United sky without being a professional.
Right. So baseball took you to college. Which that I really appreciated, that kind of hustle factor that you showed with that, and then kind of this idea of like you don't get, or is that different? But like you don't get what you don't ask for, you never get what you don't ask for. So the idea that, like you said, when you talk to a stranger, it's like, well, you don't know what's gonna come of it, or maybe you can help them, maybe they can help you, or maybe you just talk and never see each other again, and maybe they tell that story about this stranger like right in their day, like I want to talk about, so what job was it that you were working that you so you ended up like injuring your arm? A lot of injuries. I don't know what you really extreme.
Lots of history of injuries.
So you injured your arm, started working from home, which is like a temporary thing. Ended up being like so productive that your boss is like, hey, like why don't you think about doing that like post injury, like on a more regular basis. So what job was that?
I was working for 100 Flowers back in New York. Okay. This is like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years, no, 10 years ago at this point. So I moved to Miami in 2012, actually the day before Sandy hit New York. But I was working from home with a broken pec muscle, a torn pec muscle right out of my socket, doing some dumbass weights. No reason to be doing these type of weights, but yeah, torn my pec muscle. Took a page out of Tim Ferriss's book to kind of prove my worth of like showing my productivity from being home and being in the office, and how much time I saved, how much longer I worked. Because like when I cut out my hour commute each way, that's 2 hours of time I could put towards work.
Right, and especially up there where it's like a commute is a commute.
In sales, the best time to call someone is before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. Because at this time no one's coming at them. There's no booked meetings. They have their own time to catch up on stuff. This is the time to get somebody before work starts, after it ends.
Also getting them when they're like, I don't want to deal with this.
No, usually they're like they're happiest at that point of their day.
Okay.
When work ends and before it starts. Sure. They're kind of like in a good situation. Nothing, Right. They're kind of good. And also Saturday morning at 6:30 in the morning. It's the best email open rate between CEOs.
What?
True.
Emails or calling?
Emails.
Okay.
Don't call someone. I
was like, what?
Not a good idea. But yeah, so I basically kind of warranted my work from home status. I was moving to Miami anyway, so it worked out real well. I kept my remote job in Miami for a few years before I joined the team at the new Tropic. And I just loved the fact that I was able to do awesome work from home. Before it was a real thing. Like it wasn't that common, 10 years ago to work from home. Right. It took a lot of convincing because this is a big corporate company in New York. Everyone's in the office. There's like 500 employees. They're all there every day. Right. And if you're not there, you're kind of not seen. There's no virtual environment set up back then. These days, people do operate in a virtual environment where you're, copying everybody on your Slack message, on your emails. You're saying things via virtual first instead of doing it in person. Right. And our company is now fully virtual, and we've had a lot of the best practices of how we do virtual working. And it's important to have everyone have access to what information is being put out there. Don't have like behind the scenes small meetings without people being visible on the internet. Right. And that takes some real intention about that. And I think we're going to see a lot of companies adopt this because, office space itself is expensive. People are talented in different places. Why should you have access to them? Right. Right now we have the ability to get someone who lives in New York work for your company in Miami, and that's awesome. Right. Couldn't do that 15 years ago.
Right. And I guess certain fields I feel like lend themselves more, like kind of set the tone with the like sales, for example. Depending on the product, obviously, but for the most part, sales is something like pick up a phone, you could talk to someone, they don't have to see. As long as the company's reputable and sure, it's something where, hey, does this interest you? Is it within the price that you're willing to pay for it? Cool, like we did business. So that's what's interesting for me, and seeing where those new technologies and those new work systems or dynamics are kind of coming into play and how they're rolling out in different industries. Coming myself, so I come from the perfume business, distribution, and that's something where the online arena in general, more for sale, retail sales, has put a big dent or had a big impact on the industry, because retailers. I mean, I'm sure with a lot of like, you know, those types of good, you know, if it's like clothing and all that stuff, they're just kind of going through it. So it's interesting to kind of compare and contrast to say from the back end of this online internet, you know, like technology and how it's being applied to business on the back end as opposed to on the front end, and how it's so beneficial and becoming a necessity on the back end in terms of companies being able to function, and how I see it in terms of on the front end in terms of like the consumer's experience with it with companies. It's more about you have to do it to adapt and to survive because your old playing fields don't exist anymore.
Sure.
Where I feel like it's more coming from a positive place on the back end, where it's like, oh, like this makes so much sense. Our employees are more productive. We're getting more done. It's a more it's a fostering environment. It's a more nurturing environment, you know. So I think that's kind of interesting in terms of how different like these technological breakthroughs or shifts are impacting different industries and different sides of different industries in different ways.
Yeah, I will say nothing beats the in-person component of building community. What you do need to do on the groundwork to do from the beginning part of it. Once you get the beginning core of things, you can scale that on the internet real fast. But you need to have some sort of like, you know, on the ground type of experience to build a real community. And we've seen that here in all of our cities around the country, that, you know, having boots on the ground in a place that actually put their livelihood into this is super important. And people see it in the community. When you're not part of the community in person, you kind of get left behind a lot of times.
Right.
So being in a place has a lot of value to it, especially when you're working with local media. So it's very important.
And so, what was that experience like specifically? So, New Tropic started in 2014.
Yeah, 2015 was when I first started publishing. Yeah, in January.
One of the interviews was, I guess maybe you guys.
It was erected as a company back in 2014, right. But the first publication date was in 2015. So we're almost at 5 years right now, which is a really awesome thing to hear. And in Miami, a startup goes to 5 years, which is a pretty big accomplishment.
I was gonna say it's a long time and a short time, you know, depending how you look at it, in the sense of like in Miami, that's a long time for a company to be around. But in terms of the growth that you guys have had and the reach that you guys have, it's a short time, you know, relatively, especially when you look at, you know, publications like New Times and Herald and whatever that have been around for 20, you know, whatever, I don't know, New Times, but it's impressive to see how quickly you guys have been able to kind of occupy the same arena as some of those publications that have been around for maybe 20 years. And I think it definitely is the timing played a role in terms of both the technological like kind of sphere and the cultural sphere in Miami and how things were developing in those years, but also in how you utilize technology to augment or supplement what you guys were doing in the real world. But so talk a little bit about how those early days, like how kind of the New Tropic start, and so was whereby us or
whereby us? Yeah, yeah. That's our like company, and
that's
they
the umbrella.
own all the publications around the country. And it kind of started as like, you know, a bunch of transplants didn't know how to discover Miami the right way, and a lot of folks felt the same way. It was changing very fast at the time, and you couldn't get answers to questions that you had about transit, about changing neighborhoods, about the future of what else, about buying a house in a place, like big questions that you didn't have anyone really paying attention to on a very like millennial-ish level. And we found that after having several events that were just very like grassroots, organic, invite some friends over to a house, put a whiteboard up, ask all the questions you want to ask, we'll go find answers for you. If they have a few of those big meetups, there was an audience of 1,000 people who really wanted to get involved.
And like that physically at the events, or that
physically, yeah, over a couple of meetups, like 1,000 folks came to these meetups, right? So at that point, you have an audience to start anything,
right?
Really, that's only 1,000 core customers, in your business. So if you have those people who are devoted to you, you can scale. And we started doing a daily newsletter because just out of like people had a wanting for plugging into a city that they felt otherwise was not being addressed by maybe other organizations on a holistic level, right? We find ourselves as being plugging the gaps. You know, we don't try and do everything. We really try and be complementary to everyone else that makes all the kind of like the tide rise together. That's our job.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a lot of aggregation, I feel like, that happens where it's like you always cite the source and you direct people to those other outlets where it's like, here, if you're interested in this, check this article out of this this resource out, and I feel like it is a little bit like you said, like when a rising tide, whatever. I think tides rise all ships.
I don't know what that is, but yeah, remember that term.
Rising tides lift all ships.
That's the one.
I don't think that's exactly right, but that's the idea. But yeah, the idea that obviously it's to the new Tropic's benefit to say, oh, we're providing a service to people, and we're saying, hey, instead of you having to browse the infinite abyss of the internet to say, what and where and who and how and why, listen, you're interested in this, go see these people. You're interested in this, go see these people.
Totally. Our job is basically to help you have a better life, right? And that is a holistic life. Mm-hmm. That is knowing what's happening in the news, what's happening fun, arts and culture-wise, how to understand how the place is changing. It's super important. And then, as we open new cities, we have the same approach as those locals need. And it may change by city.
Right.
Seattle and Miami, two polar opposite cities.
Right.
But the way you engage, kind of the same.
Right.
We have the same digital tendencies.
Right.
So you kind of mirror those things. The formats stay the same, but the topics can go really as far as we need to go in each place.
Right.
So the fact that it started out of just like pure need really is really great to see that. And the folks that have been reading us from day one are still here.
Right.
Those are our most. They ping us as much as they used to ping us back then.
Right.
They're still involved. They're still sending us ideas, and we kind of follow the breadcrumbs down to cover things and find things to get involved in by people telling us about it who are readers.
Yeah, and you're big on people I guess it's more for pictures, but using the hashtag live like you live here, which at first I don't know, it sounds like live like you live here, so you're always living like you live
here.
Not
everybody.
But I get the drift, and it's like grown on me where I'm like, okay, it's like it's like that thing where it's like you have the first sip of the drink, like, I don't know, and then it's like you keep drinking, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna stop this in the fridge.
Good.
But yeah, so I definitely see and am aware of that element of the new Tropic being very almost interactive or collaborative with your users, with your members, which I think is a great approach to say, because I've seen things like with the New Times where it gets a little contentious of like, oh, these people complaining like we're like doing all this hard work and whatever, and it's like, okay, well, that's what you're here for, like.
Yeah.
And
well, I kind of see it as we're doing the second half of news. There's plenty of awesome publications doing great content, and our job is to do the second half. We've identified what the problems are. Now let's go talk about solutions.
Mm-hmm.
How can we get folks to activate and raise their hands and say, I want to take action on this that I read about. How can I do that? And if we can be that connection point for folks to kind of take the second step and start making solutions to what's happening in all of our cities, then we've done our job. And that's what we see our job as. And I think not enough cities have that, have that entity doing that stuff. We have parts of it happening for certain topics,
right,
but no one's attacking the city in a way that I'm going to holistically solve a lot of our issues of contention, and be your like best friend and giving you a hand, right?
Right.
That's kind of what we are. We're your morning cheat sheet. We're your morning best friend saying, this is what's up today.
Right.
Here's how you get involved.
Right. Which I think, is a great thing to do. And it's something that you mentioned that I think, again, that I really identified with is that you barely read the world news, and when you travel, and I guess, you travel a lot now with in your role with Where By Us, that instead you read like local news, and the main reason being that you're inspired to take action in ways that can actually have an impact, as opposed to being kind of driven crazy by all this stuff that's happening all over the world, and like, well, what can I do, and kind of just being like, well, I can't, what am I going to do to affect all this big crazy stuff that's happening, and instead saying, well, what can I affect, and focusing on that. And that's something that I've always, I'd say at least once a week, like people be talking about like politics, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't watch TV, and I see the headlines on Facebook, but I scroll by them pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, it's so important to act locally. Because the people that you can make change for instantaneously, you can happen in the blink of an eye for you, and you see them the next day. Mm-hmm. You've done some help, and you see it happen. Nothing more for me is more fulfilling than that one thing of like doing something for somebody, and the next day I can see it in action. It's so hard to impact stuff on a global level. It takes years and years and years, and we have to do it as well. But a lot of it starts right here on the corner. So if everyone starts taking action on the corner, the whole world's going to one day be better.
Right.
That's kind of the idea, right? It takes a lot of good humans to do that, and I think we're trying to inspire that as much as we can. And that's why we stuck to local and we believe in local, and that's the reason why we keep doing what we do every day, because we see a lot of green shoots happening in cities, and we see folks starting to step up and start auxiliary organizations to do and solve those problems. And we sometimes we can kickstart that.
Right.
We want to kickstart as many awesome movements as we can.
Yeah. No, and I definitely agree with that statement in terms of the kind of domino effect or the trickle up effect of like creating that impact on a local level, and that kind of then being replicated, and you see it, you know, I call it like the franchising of neighborhoods in a way where, you know, the Brooklynification of you know of I mean, let's say the US for now, but I think it's also on a global scale where all these, you know, neighborhoods that pop up and they're in very strong identities, and, you know, so obviously Wynwood here, and you know, you have Asheville like in North Carolina, and
I was just there.
Denver, because are you back and forth there?
Yeah, it's there all of August.
Yeah.
It's such a cool place.
So yeah, and I'm sure you will agree there's like similar, obviously I feel like it's taking this kernel that, I don't know that Brooklyn was like the original, but that's the one that I kind of
I would say
identify.
Portland really was kind of like the driving force like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that town really took on local as like a flag.
Well, so it's not necessarily the local aspect that I'm talking about, but more the branding of a neighborhood, to say this is the neighborhood for art, food, music, culture. So like Austin also would be, I think, a good example of a city that kind of like, you know, had created that identity for itself. And it's this idea that it's something for and by the locals of that area, whether it be specifically that neighborhood or surrounding neighborhoods, and they're all kind of gravitating there because of cheap rent and because of like all these different reasons. And then eventually, because it kind of does take on this identity and this mystique and this, you know, this value at the end of the day, then it starts becoming a commodity in a way, and it you know, it kind of grows, I think, beyond its skin, and it becomes something else. And I don't know that is inevitable, and it always happens, but I mean, I think that in the cases, like, I mean, most of the ones I named, and in general, like the ones that I've seen, it is kind of an inevitability. It's like, how long does it take, and how organically does it happen, and all of that. But the idea of, you know, everyone has now these, like, this roadmap to gentrification, where it's like, okay, well, first the artists come and they start doing the murals, and then you have the galleries and the studios, and then, you know, the restaurants and the bars start kind of trickling in, and then you get a brewery, and then, you know, and then you get co-working spaces, and then you get the micro retail, and then you get the micro apartments, and it's kind of like a
starter kit.
Exactly, it's like that meme where it's like, oh, if you're opening a restaurant in 2019, it's like the starter kit with like the old-fashioned light bulbs and like the wood, the stained wood, and the.
I go to a lot of conferences and I see all the tourism boards of different cities with the same exact pitch. We got a dog park, we have a co-working space, we have a new green LEED certified building, we have a brand new university system.
So you're confirming my hypothesis.
Very funny. But they do have all those great things,
I know,
which is really encouraging.
That's for me the. It's not a dichotomy, but like the being pulled in two directions of like, yes, these are great things, and they make human life better in the sense of like being able to experience those things, and it's great. But it's also the four horsemen of what comes after.
The biggest thing is to have everything open for everybody, and that's where you get to the point where it's not for everybody, and that's where we want to have that change. You know, it has to happen in all neighborhoods, not just one neighborhood. Right. And that's what we want to have happening.
Which I think, and I mean, that I will say I do think is starting to happen in Miami, where you see now this like multiplication effect, where it's like, you know, we have Wynwood, and then now Little Haiti obviously is kind of, it's a neck and neck between Little Haiti and Little Havana, you know, in terms of the development that's happening, and then you have like the little sibling that's trailing behind, that's like trying to catch up and hold at the coattails, like Leah Arts District, and then you have what else? Opalaka is trying, God bless them, but I think it's going to take a little bit of the municipality getting its legs a little bit back under it before that could really happen. But and then you have Broward, obviously, you have like the Choose 9.
I think it's happening further out. Yeah, like Doral and a lot of neighborhoods in Broward, and those people are getting faster growth than I think we are here.
Yes, and because the thing is, I think it's being more intentionally and better supported.
Yeah, like the government's behind it.
Exactly,
which is interesting to see that.
It is, but it's also when you know, when you see the stuff happening behind the scenes, it's less surprising, or it makes more sense, and it's kind of more. It's a given because what is it? It's basically the instigator or the initiator from my perspective of all this stuff was Wynwood. Wynwood was kind of the ground zero to say the model of the street art and the this and the like all that stuff happening, and it was people say the artist and their role and it brings gentrification. It's like no, like there were the developers that were there that made their money in Soho and in Lincoln Road and in whatever. Like they it's not their first rodeo. They've been through that progression of neighborhoods, and that's their job, is to say, I'm gonna buy something for X amount, and I know because I know, or because I assume, or because I know how to make it become more valuable down the line. And they found the formula over the years where, and again, this is my perspective, but where it's like, oh, okay, this is what happened maybe at one point, a little more organically. How do I nurture this? How do I catalyze this to where it's happening faster and I get my return on investment faster? And I think a big part of that is how, and maybe it always existed, I don't know, but how real estate agencies, and developers and other kind of, I think, interchangeable words depending on the criteria, started becoming more aware of the importance of PR. And from the standpoint of not like I'm promoting my firm or my business, but I'm promoting my properties and my clients' properties, and that's going to benefit me. And I think that for me, what's unfortunate and why I say it's this kind of mixed bag for me is I think what gets lost in that process is you kind of attribute the importance or the underlying factor to the success in these neighborhoods to these basically middlemen who are just, they have the money to invest in a property at a given time where the value is not as high, and that they have their eyes on obviously all the analytics that tell them, oh, this is a neighborhood in flux and that has potential to grow. I mean, Little Haiti, the geography, it's like, there's a lot of factors, but and so I think that what gets lost is the fact that it's actually all the small business owners that occupy these neighborhoods, and that yes, get attracted by the low rents, by the zero rents in some cases, which that's a more recent phenomenon, I would say, that developers now are willing to to give up a year's worth of rent on a property that they own, knowing that the businesses that they're selectively choosing to give that luxury to are the ones that are going to create the buzz, that are going to get the PR, that's going to build up their neighborhood and grow their whole portfolio, which honestly, to me, I think basically is insider trading, just in a different industry and in a different way. They're artificially inflating the value of neighborhoods basically. And it's not to say they wouldn't achieve that value eventually, but it's saying it's happening in 5 years or 10 years instead of 20, 30, 50. And that's where I have more of the problem with it. And especially, I've been in Little Haiti since, my family since like the 90s, but I started my space in Little Haiti. I started US Space, my place in Little Haiti, in 2011, 2012, and I saw it happen firsthand. Now everything that's happening with Magic City and all that, and I saw it, and I was working in Wynwood from 2005. So I saw it happen there, and then I started seeing the signs in Little Haiti and how it was the same people doing the same things, and how they learned from Wynwood what worked and what didn't, and they started applying it. And this idea of like I'm gonna offer you a year's worth rent free in this space, but I want to see a plan. I want to see, what are you gonna do? What's the concept? Like, how are you gonna bring people here? And I'm not saying the business people, at the end of the day, it's a free market, and if they can do it, they can do it. But I think in the same way as the stock market, how there needs to be some accountability and some kind of checks and balances, I think it's something that needs to be considered. And that's why I appreciate what you guys do in terms of some of the spotlights that you do in the community, because I think you do focus on the actual people who are the ones that are responsible, whether it be like a Lolo at Sweat Records, or like the people who are Adam and Box Elder, like the people who are responsible for actually building up the communities where they move into, and then eventually, and they know that it's temporary. They know that
they're going to be moving.
You know, they have there's a ticking clock, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just my rant for that.
No,
I wish I had one rant.
If anything, I've learned from moving so much that nothing is forever.
Right.
And change will inevitably happen.
Statue of Liberty's head is going to end up on a beach.
I hope not. But, you know, the way you change is really important, and then what you put behind is really important. So that's what you need to be doing. So I totally. I understand and why we have it here.
You have to be more concerned with ruffling feathers than
no, not even that. Not even that. Yeah, I don't have any answers actually.
Okay.
I don't know, what the answer is to it. I wish I did.
Well,
if I did, I would write a book on it. But I don't know.
Propose something here, and maybe the new Tropic or Whereby Us will
propose away,
because you guys have the legs to make shit actually like happen beyond like the vision board. My proposal is do what they're doing, but incorporate the businesses that are already there, because the whole idea with gentrification and with this, I'm taking Little Haiti as the example, but it could be applied to any of the other neighborhoods we mentioned, to say, B&M, or like any of the little like mom and pop Haitian run businesses that are on Northeast 2nd Avenue or on 62nd or on 59th or 54th, to say, hey, rather, like, I get it, you're getting priced out, I bought this property, I need it to be successful, blah, 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 great. You have a place like the Citadel or like the Magic City properties where, Citadel, I don't know if they've offered like free spaces, but Magic City, I know for a fact, has offered free spaces, like to like free, like a year's worth of free rent or 6 months of free rent or whatever. Why don't you offer that to the mom and pop Haitian owned business to say, hey, you're getting priced out of your space. Okay, listen, I'm going to give you this space. You have 6 months. I'm gonna give you some, what's the word, like workshops, or I'm gonna help educate or kind of give you some tools to make your business more adapted to the wave of the future. The biggest thing
is to invest in them. To invest in them.
Right.
Become partners with them. Exactly. Invest in what you're gonna be buying a neighborhood on, and have them folks be there for the long term. If you could do that, everyone wins.
Right, but
how many folks are going to do that?
And that's the problem. It's like we know
people will say, "I want to invest in this place to keep it, to improve the place, but keep it what it is." And most folks don't have that vision to do that, and that's just the capitalistic. I guess.
I don't know if it's the vision or if it's the question of right. It's easier and cheaper to outsource. So if I can bring in a cool hipster friendly concept that's going to come in and that's going to have all the right the old-fashioned light bulbs and the wood, the natural wood, planks and the whatever. And I know in a year or two they're gonna have a following, and that's gonna be my new community to shape my neighborhood around. I love language because that's their slogan is shape neighborhoods. Like into what though? Yeah.
If I hear it with one more live, work, play, I'm gonna vomit on myself.
But okay. Anyway. I feel like I have to kind of get us back on track now.
We're gonna move on.
Okay. So the new Tropic. I guess this is more Whereby Us because it applies to multiple cities. But the idea or the mission is to, or correct me if I'm wrong, is to help the world's curious locals understand, explore, and love their cities.
Yeah.
True
facts.
True that. So right now, or at least the last article I saw, but I think there's a couple that weren't accounted for. You guys are in Miami, Orlando, Seattle, and Portland.
And now Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
number 5. Just brought them on in the wintertime. So 5.
Okay, so last winter.
Yeah,
like
February.
Seasons
maybe
here.
it was like April.
Okay.
April.
When is the winter again?
Yeah.
Right.
When it's not this hot
September and it's 90 degrees outside right now.
When wearing pants it feels like it's normal.
Yeah. I was like, pants? No, God no. But so I get what I wanted to get into with that is one, how you determine what cities you're gonna expand to, and then as a kind of two-pronged question is, what is the process of kind of setting yourself up in that new city, and then also to kind of parallel or tie that into how it happened with the New Tropic, because New Tropic was the first one, right?
Yeah, except for number 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, I mean it's a really amazingly fun process. nothing is more fun than opening a brand new city for us, because we get to go live there and be part of the city for several months. Interview several hundred people who live there, understand what they love, what they hate, what they want to see improved. And that by itself is such a great exercise. You make 100 new friends within like a couple of weeks. And I love the fact that we get to do that, pretty regularly. And
so not, when you say interview, not to hire, like just I want to get to know you guys.
Like this.
Right.
We spend an hour, we get a coffee, we have lunch, we have dinner. We maybe ask them to take us on their favorite thing to do in the city.
Cool.
A normal thing.
Yeah.
Your favorite thing is actually going to the bookstore and going book shopping? Cool. Let's do that together. And let's just shoot the breeze. I wanted to see what it's like to live here through your eyes, and kind of see the things that you're dealing with as an opportunity to improve. And that process is so essential to our opening in the city, and so much fun. Because once you do that for a couple weeks, you know that city pretty well.
Right.
And I think everyone should try and do that more in their lives. Try and do interviews with people. Try and dig into what they love and hate. It's really fun to do.
Yeah.
So, and the biggest thing of why we go to a city is we find great people who live there. So folks that we can trust and that want to have that vision to open that city with us. So kind of like a mini entrepreneur.
So it is a little bit of a vetting, like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, you have to find the right people who want to do this, because it's really becoming an entrepreneur yourself. If you're a director of a city, you have to love that city so much that you would literally bleed for it.
Right.
And that's what all of our directors do. They would do this job for free.
I know you guys are like they signing
No,
stuff.
but it really is to see the passion behind it. Like, people don't work here just for money. Like, this is not a place to get rich.
Right.
We can all make twice as much money doing other things.
Yeah.
So, have to love what you're doing in the city, and you get to have an experience that most people don't get to have. You're plugging what's happening every day in the city. You're in rooms that you're like, how do I get in this room with like the mayor and like the head of this company? Like, that doesn't happen in normal jobs.
Right.
So that alone is like such an attractive thing to be a part of. Like, the FOMO in you is like satisfied.
Right.
So for me, I love it.
Right.
I love to like know what's happening in the city, and I feel like I'm part of the change, which is really fun.
Yeah. No, and that's I think that's definitely it's something that not everyone is aware of. Like that is a thing that you can do. Like you already talked about in one of the interviews. Like, oh, like Miami is one of the few cities where you can pretty much anyone can get a meeting with the mayor. It's not that hard. You just put it on the bus or whatever.
Sometimes.
Yeah, maybe less recently. And I definitely found that I feel like I have that mentality a little bit because of my background, like in the business world, where it's like I never balked at like calling, if I was calling, like trying to get a new account or whatever, like call and you say, hey, can I speak to the owner or the manager, whatever, the decision maker, and it's not something to be scared over, to be like, oh, I can't ask for it, And so I think that once I started getting, I started taking Miami more seriously as like something that I was doing. It was something that kind of applied to that, where it's like I would be at a venue and I'd be like, oh, hey, is the owner, or I would just hear the, find out, oh, that's the owner, and I wouldn't be shy to be like, hey man, I really love what you're doing here. Like, have you ever thought about doing a comedy show? Have you ever thought whatever? And that's how long
confidence.
Confidence, or like, what's the worst that's gonna happen?
That's really it.
I was always better at it with business ventures than with girls, though. That's the thing. It's you would think, right? Right. It seems so much worse with girls for some reason.
The worst thing that happens is you start a business and it fails.
Right.
And you find a new job.
Right.
I mean, if you got heart and you have passion, you can find a job somewhere.
I love that, and I feel like that should be one of our takeaways. We got like 5 more minutes. I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned. I don't know if you mentioned or if it was just a quote in general from the new Tropic. It was in one of the interviews, but where you said
maybe
we put our community members first and above everything else, even profits.
Totally. Yeah, we believe in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is that a thing?
It is a thing because if you don't put those people that are your truest readers first, no one's gonna read it.
Right.
So you're gonna not make any money in the first place.
I guess my question is not how is that a thing, how is that sustainable?
I mean, we work really hard. We work really hard to make that happen. And I think we've done a good job in the past 5 years of taking on the right partners to do things that are very mission aligned. And that's the biggest thing, is finding that alignment with brands who care about the city.
Right.
Whatever the mission is for them, whether it be transit, wellness, startups, whatever it is, we try and make that alignment happen from day one. And if we don't have that, it's going to be bad for that organization. their experience is not going to be great because no one actually wants to interact with them.
Right.
And we know that from day one a lot of times.
Right.
So we've been very cognizant about that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. But I will say this, like, I will leave this with you. Anybody listening to this, or if you have a job, it's not about loving what you do. It's about loving why you do it. And if you don't love why you do it, everything is going to be meaningless. So a lot of times when I'm doing my job, I don't love cold calling people.
Right.
I don't love data entering things into spreadsheets. I don't love putting decks together. I love that because I love why I'm doing it. It's
right.
an impact because I'm helping people have better lives. I'm involved in things that are making the place a better place to live.
Right.
And if you have the why, everything else is just like, noise.
Right.
And it's really important to have that.
And I like that we're ending on that because it's a great message. It's not love what you do, but it's love what the things you do help you accomplish.
Yeah, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Just love why you're doing it.
That's an easier way to say it.
That's really it. And a lot of folks don't get that part. It makes the monotonous task that you dread really great.
Right.
You could find some passion in sorting through these files.
It's gonna get me through the next week.
Exactly.
At least.
if you're building something, whatever you're doing, there's a lot of crappy parts of those to build the building of things. So it's important to just remember the why.
Yeah. I love that. All right. So Chris, thank you again for sitting down with us today, and let people know where they can. Up to you, follow you, or where by us in New Tropic. I'm assuming most of the people that are listening subscribe to the New Tropic.
All channels. Read our newsletter and find me on every single channel at Chris Adamo. So hit me up. Let's talk. I'm happy to help whenever I can. I'm very open to talking and helping folks.
And what's the next? I know you guys have an event coming up.
We have two. A big one on Tuesday called The Future of Artists in Miami at the Anderson. Tickets are on sale on our site. It's a full dinner with awesome cocktails. You're going to meet 6 great artists. They're going to walk them through how they're doing their lives in Miami. And then on Friday the 4th, Baptist Health Women's Summit.
Nice.
Come on by.
I'm glad I thought about this. So we could talk about. Awesome. Well, Chris, we're getting played out. U-Haul, Yo Miami, John, Joel Radio. It's Yo Miami.
Peace.
Yo Miami, all the things. Jay Wakefield.